I'm going to present a couple of videos that will go together, and it's about a recent experience that I've been through that I'd like to share, which is about resolving the primal self. And there's actually two other cells that were linked in really close. But what I want to do is just record a couple of videos about this experience to share with you what it was for me, how it manifested, and how it undid. Um, yes. So, um, so basically, I I went through an experience recently where I was working closely with some other people, some other spiritual students on a project, and we were working hard. It was a lot of work, and everyone had their own everyone has their own quirks, their own like things which can be, a little bit out of alignment and everything, and that's what was happening. Mine was coming up. I was feeling sort of frustrated with having, because I was working so hard, and other people were kind of like push, let's go, and asking lots of questions, and just the normal sort of conflicts that happen in, as happens with human beings, like we don't have to be like evil to sort of trigger one another, or to trigger to trigger our primal selves. And I ended up finding myself, this tension just built and built and built, and I kept blaming the outer, like, there's too much pressure, there's too much, expectations on me. And then I even like stepped right back and said, I'm just gonna take a break, because I could tell I was gonna pop, and I'm very familiar with this pattern. My conscious you was familiar with this pattern of sort of like this build-up of tension, and I sort of know what happens at the end of it, which is, a complete explosion. And I said, I'm going to step back and take a break. But the interesting thing is that program, the Primal Self program, it kept running. And it went back in to the situation that said, I'm going to take a break from this. And it went back in and just started doing its thing, being very demanding, becoming frustrated, expecting, just expecting a lot from other people. And then, it got what it wanted, which was, I don't, there's nothing rational I can say about what it wanted, but what happened was I lost control of myself, where the primal self took over, and just felt very frustrated. And then I could see, like, the pattern always has been where the primal self just sabotages the outer situation. And it sabotaged the situation with the group of people that I was working in. It affected other people, triggered their cells. Not everybody was triggered, but the point is, feelings were hurt, and I felt bad, or the primal self twin felt bad. And I knew straight away, because I was already half seeing the pattern, because when I was saying I'm going to remove myself from this situation, my conscious you was saying, like, oh, I know what happens, I know what goes after this, I know this program, this is where I'm looking at it now, it's a computer program, and it's not me. And I stepped back from it. I stepped right back from it, and I just realized, I can't do this anymore. I can't live with this pattern that just keeps coming, and it keeps sabotaging outer situations, and it sabotages me. Like, it just sabotages my life. It can destroy relationships. It's a horrible pattern, and it's no one's fault. It's not even my fault. It's just something I took on board. So I just got straight to work. I just turned to the masters. I turned to people that I trust, and people who I knew wouldn't validate me, but also would go easy on me. You know what I mean? Like, just and said, can you help in any way? And, I was guided to teachings. I was invoking light, calling to Jesus to help me through this. I organised a session with Kim, a one-on-one session, and because when I'm set and determined on something, like I just I was done. I was just done. I was like, I do not want this anymore in my life, 100%. And that's that real burning passion, burning will. And unless you need that, you do need that to want to let it go, because it's not going to let go easy, this primal self. It's been around for a long, long, long time, a couple of million years in my case. So letting it go is not easy, because it's been so tightly woven into the mind and into, the all four lower bodies. It's like, I would say underpants, but I don't wear them. It's just like, wearing something really close fitting that you barely even don't know it's there. Like skin. It's like skin. Like, you just can't imagine letting go of your skin, and that's what it's like. It's like it becomes a part of you. Like, it becomes like your skin. And so anyway, I got to it, and the session with Kim helped loads. He kept sort of taking me in different directions, like looking from different angles, and it was very interactive. I was sort of like, at some points I was kind of like, no, that's not really gonna help me with my process and everything. And eventually, just a question Kim asked sort of really, really helped. And I don't even recall what the question was, but the answer gave the clue of what the belief of the primal self was, which is, I'll just tell the story about, where it came about, because it was almost like a credo for a while. Like, it was sort of at this turning point about 15 years ago, after a really destructive end to a relationship. And the pattern had been, destruction after destruction after destruction all my life, and it was always them, it was always the other person. The fallen beings did that, that ex did that, it was their bad behavior that caused me to react like this. But at the end of this one, I remember I just said to God, I don't trust people, and I don't trust myself around people. And finally, just sort of this crystallized. It was like, oh, this is what my primal self was believing. And Kim pointed out that it's the primal self that doesn't trust people, but it's actually when the second part to that, like, I don't trust myself around people. Kim pointed out that that's actually the conscious you talking about the primal self. And when you think about it, it's really interesting, because it's true. Like, my conscious you could not trust the primal self, because the primal self is just like, it sabotages everything and was just throwing me back into other selves of, depression and just just so ashamed and blame and, feeling I've done something wrong, like, just a whole bunch of other things. So so the session with Kim went really, really well. And, but I could feel like, I haven't felt that release yet, but I felt like I'd seen the belief. So, I was able to sort of add that to my calls and invoke light and, just a few more days progress. And luckily I had a session lined up with my psychologist not long after that. And I've known my psychologist for a long, long time, it must be 16, 17 years we've been working together. So she knows my primal self well. She knows my history. And I just said to her, this is not about anyone else, it's no one else. I don't want to talk about the outer situation that gave rise to, how I reacted. I want to bring an end. I want to see right through, and I want to let go of the way I've been reacting. I want to let go of this program, and, I need you to work with me to help jolt me out of this, because I knew I was going to need like a koan, some way to trick my mind, So I think I was listening to like a dictation from Portia not long ago, and she was just sort of saying like, if if you could be given like, a single word, a single phrase that could, that could make you snap out of these things, then like a mantra or something, like, would it really work? And it's like, well, no, like, because what happened for me in this session, there was a few words that just sort of, I just said out loud and they came to me. It's not the words, that made me let go. It was the experience within me that was the letting go. So the words that came, like, we're looking at this self, we're looking at this program, and just suddenly I just realized I'm more than this. I am not this. I am more than this. I am more than this program. And see, you could say that to yourself about yourselves or whatever, and it may do nothing, So the point is like, somehow, I just kept working with, question, koan after koan, question after question, looking at different angles. Who is this? Is this who I am? And, it's always like, no, yeah, no, you know what I mean? I could see it from all these different angles, but finally, it was just the words that went with it was, and the awakening was like, I am not this. I am not this program. This is not who I am. I can let this go. I can let it go. And the words stopped, and just the release happened, just tears. And I could just feel every last drop of tension, which was the primal self, just fall from my heart in particular, but just, it just melted from my body like the skin melting away. And just so many tears, but it wasn't sadness, it wasn't joy. It was just, I guess, emotional release. That's all it was. It was just like, just emotions just pouring out, and really, nothing else was sort of needed, like, just other than to, just melt into that experience of release and letting go. And here we are now. So there were 2 more selves that, had to be released. Not long afterwards, maybe a couple of days after, I felt, I was feeling not so much a huge amount of tension, but, I felt something else going on. And I just asked Jesus, what's going on? Why am I feeling, feeling something building up again so quickly? And he just said there was actually 2 other cells wedged in close that go with this, and go after them. So I will come back in another video soon, and I will talk with you about those ones. And they wedged right in with the primal self, but it was like, once that primal self was like, this wedge here, once that was lifted and just, just disintegrated, just gone, it left these 2 other cells, and they were just exposed, and they're ready to go. It was just, the hard work was done getting that big wedge of the primal self out, and it left these other 2, which I feel like they're both gone, but I'll tell you more in the next couple of videos. So I hope you enjoy this. I hope you enjoy this. I have enjoyed this. I have enjoyed letting go of this primal self. I enjoy not having to deal with it anymore. I enjoy knowing that it is not who I am. Never was.